Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my returning guest this morning, Mr. Cory Janssen. How you doing, Cory?
You know, usually people don't have me back. So, Tyler, I'm like super excited about this.
This might be 3 times, man. This might be 3 times. I'm either a glutton for punishment or, I'm short on guests. No, that's not it. I love our conversations, my friend.
Like we're 500. I mean, this whole podcast thing, it might actually be real for you. Hey, like
you know what? I just think
Joe Rogan of Calgary, right?
It was a fun idea that just got carried away with itself, man. Yes, I'm approaching episode 500 on be launched on May 5th this year. So you'll come out right before that. So this was a fun off the corner of my desk, why not idea. And then COVID happened and everyone wanted to hang out. So I met more people in the first year of COVID than I met 5 years prior with my business dating app that I also call a podcast.
Yeah. There's actually, it's amazing what you do. So yeah, really
Thanks,
interested. Man. We're looking forward to diving into it. I'm assuming you want to talk about AI. I don't know. What do you want to talk about?
I'm curious. Well, philosophies, your perspective on the world. You are co-founder and co-CEO at AltaML. So I always plead ignorance first. What the heck's an AltaML? Let us in the room. Give us a quick bio for anyone who hasn't heard of you guys. And then we'll talk about a little industry stuff. We'll talk about where you're at. And then we're going to get into some of the messy bits, the biases, the realities, the movement that is AI, the robots taking over the world.
We'll touch on that, I'm sure. So we build AI software. So AltaML is a platform that builds and invests in applied vertical AI. So let me unpack that for you. When I say vertical, I mean industry specific. So when you're using ChatGPT or any of these big platforms that are out there, usually it's just like they would say horizontal. It's kind of like almost part of like the infrastructure. Yeah. And so where we would go is going in with a very specific problem, say in legal tech, right? Or in energy or in finance or in health. And we're trying to build AIs that solve directly in that space. And part of the reason for that is like, I don't have a couple $1 billion to compete with the hyperscalers, right? Like the big guys, if you want to train these big, gigantic models, right? It's literally hundreds of millions to billions of dollars. And so what we see is that, and we'll kind of touch on it if you want to kind of go down that rabbit hole, but we're seeing more and more of the actions shifting from this kind of infrastructure layer up into what we call the application layer in the space. So it's industry specific. It's applied in that we don't do fundamental research. Like we leave that for the universities. We've got amazing AI talent here, especially at the U of A, locally here in Alberta. We don't think we can play in that game like Google DeepMind that's going to spend billions of dollars a year literally trying to invent new algorithms. There's enough out there right now to apply to real business where you can make a huge financial impact, right? So think of us as basically a blue collar AI company. Sometimes we'll build that.
I have never thought of you in that way. I like that you said that.
Well, like the valley doesn't. I mean, like they've never been to a midstream gas plant. They've never seen what like a facility up north in Fort Mac looks like. They don't know that these things exist, right? Talk about pulp and paper. So when you look at where AI is going to impact the world, we believe that the traditional industries are the next ones that are going to see the most change, right? And these things is kind of a buzzword around AI agents and agentic workflows are really changing everything about how industries can use AI.
To oversimplify, you didn't come up with electricity. You didn't build the electric grid. You don't create the electricity, but you're there to help facilitate all the things that are now possible. I didn't even think back to the history of electricity. Like, why do we need it? This is a waste. Oh, we can tax it. Oh, and then all of a sudden, everything that's sprung up around to change the world. Is that an accurate, way oversimplified?
So 6 months ago, I would have said that's complete bullshit. This electricity, AI is new electricity. Like, there's a prof by the name of Dr. Andrew Ng. He's one of the most famous data scientists in the world. Yeah. And like, probably like 8 or 9 years ago, said AI is the new electricity. I was like, okay, Silicon Valley hype cycle, right? Now, I believe that's true. What you're seeing, the hyperscalers, so Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, what they really are turning into utilities. So an interesting stat, Microsoft last year spent more on CapEx, on capital expenditures, than people. Everyone thinks of these software companies as asset light. It's just, the people that walk in and under the door, right? Yeah. They're actually more like electrical utility in many ways, right? They just want to sell you the compute, right? And the storage, and AI is the best possible workload. So they're seeing a future where the usage of AI, something called inference, right, is going to be absolutely massive. And we should touch on data centers and the Alberta play there as well, because there's some really cool stuff out on data centers. But in many ways, like, yeah, think of it now, we've entered a new era where the cost of intelligence is plummeting. It's, depending on how you measure it, it's like 10x to 100x, depending on how you want to measure it. Like using these large language models, using this new kind of AI tech. And so now when you think, wait a minute, if the cost of intelligence is like nominal, how many different use cases, how many problems can I solve? So we believe that, in fact, you're going this new era, you need to actually think of AI in the same way as you would as electricity.
Looking across your energy and resources, financial services, forestry and ag, health, manufacturing, a couple of years ago, were these same organizations thinking, how do we create our own infrastructure? And has that just faded away? Because that creates a lot of noise, it quickly becomes unrealistic. But that proprietary and who owns it and the democratization of, and does it become like treated like a utility where it's almost an expectation or an essential service? Is that happening faster in some industries than others in terms of people getting okay that we're going to build our thing on top of your stuff? Sorry, that's a real technical way to say it.
No. I think one of the I'm a bit of, I love philosophy and history, especially economic history. If you look back at the Industrial Revolution, many manufacturers actually built their own power plants. Yeah. So that's why you saw the textile industry set up on the rivers, because they were literally setting up like the dams or what it was.
Well, it was the mill, right, in the small town. It was set up on the river, and it had to turn the wheel so you could run the mill.
Because there was no utility,
the grains. Yeah, you could grind the grain.
You couldn't just plug it in, right? So the bane of our existence over the last couple of years has been our competition is not, in the most case, usually isn't some other startup, right? It's usually internal. It's usually it's saying if we're and again we. With our model, so we build AI software, we can co-develop with large corporates and public sector. We back entrepreneurs, so we have a venture studio model where we'll be a technical co-founder. And then we can, in more and more way, we actually think it looks more like a private equity model. So that, just without getting too into detail, just think we can go to market in a whole bunch of different ways. The core is that if it's building vertical AI, we want to be the best in North America at that early stage investment in that space, right? And so as we're going in, you're bang on. Like, it's this wild west where it seems it would be insane to build your own power plant right now, unless you're the largest of all larger. I mean, up in Fort Mac, they should build their own power plants, right? But could you imagine setting up on the outskirts of Calgary, building your own power plant? Well, like, in many ways, that's what's being done inside corporate Canada, right? And corporate America, where because you're still not entirely sure how this whole AI thing is going to play out. Everyone knows it's important. And so they turn to their CTO and it's like, okay, well, let's go spend a few $1 million making our data better and building a data warehouse. And that sounds good, but usually doesn't get you that much further ahead.
Well, if you go back to the venture model of kind of venture capital, kind of the early days, I've heard some of the trends of like, oh, this month there was 27 references to AI in pitch decks. Now it's 800 or in annual reports. Then I also heard a lot of investors going, what are we investing in? Like, what are you actually building? Because you're building a layer on top of someone else's infrastructure, but you don't really hear that going, whoa, wait a second. I guess maybe let's talk about the data centers. You're building a data center. What about the power? Like, it is an interesting conversation that's happening right now, right?
Okay. And so what you're describing usually was referred to as a wrapper, right? So let's say you can take in an afternoon, a 22-year-old kid with a little bit of, programming prowess can go and then just put something on ChatGPT and build a cool little solution, right? And if you go on AI Twitter, it's like, hey, I built a stock analyst to this. I'm like, and
which was very prevalent, especially when we all instantly got access, right?
I can send you 20 links right now.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But that's like saying, and we should touch on the definition of AI agent, because I think that comes into this. But to a large extent, if you can build something that quickly, then there's no economic defensibility.
Yeah.
Now
there's no moat. There's no moat.
Exactly. I would argue, though, we saw some companies early on, say with GPT 3.5, so some of the earlier models that were actually usable from OpenAI, basically do wrappers. But like, say if they had an existing software platform, and so they started building these tools and they started collecting more data to see how their users were actually interacting. And that almost like second derivative data becomes actually a bit of an edge. So then they there's a famous Canadian company called Jasper that like basically was one of the fastest growing companies in the country. And then it's like, okay, is this a wrapper or not? There's a big debate in terms of that, right?
Interesting.
So let's maybe get to AI agents. So there's a buzzword right now in the Valley, especially around AI agents and agentic workflows.
Mm-hmm.
So think of an AI agent, and AI agent is just a type of software. It's software that is built around a large language model. So these large language models, so ChatGPT, GPT is the product of ChatGPT. The underlying large language model is, and you see that when you have to drop down to 3.5 or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Grok is another one, Gemini.
Perplexity,
Perplexity actually isn't an LLM. They actually are almost a clearinghouse for all of them. If you look, it's actually underneath, right? They haven't built their own. Perplexity is a genius company,
but is that a wrapper?
So they've built. So there's.
Cory, I'm with you, Cory. I'm with you. I'm trying to keep up.
Okay, let's come back to that. Let's come back to that.
Okay, park that.
So just think of an AI agent as this new type of software that's built on top of a large language model. So the stuff that you use with ChatGPT, we have a new, essentially now software can understand language. That's super cool because now it can do all these type of things that really weren't possible before. So there's a few characteristics for these AI agents. Number one, they can plan, right? So when you use ChatGPT usually and you just, and it's a one shot and it gives you an answer, that's not actually how humans solve problems. And you're seeing then how some of these reasoning models, almost built into some of these products where what a human do, okay, so let's say I need to, I want to go on a trip. Okay, you're going to say, okay, well, I need to actually brainstorm where I want to go. Then I need to build an itinerary. You start building those plans, right? So AI agents can plan.
Then that's a great example because a trip is a journey, and oftentimes a dialogue is that, not a B, yes, no kind of dialogue, right?
Exactly. If you're working with one of your marketing clients, it's hey, what do you want? I want more sales. Okay, tell me about your value prop, right?
And the conversation starts, exactly.
Right, and I'm sure you would have a process for that, right?
Yeah.
Number two, it has memory. So it can learn over time, right? So as you start these agents, as they start seeing the same problems, they can actually store state, right? So they can go back and as they're seeing these problems, to actually improve and get better. The whole learning and machine learning, that's kind of the whole point, right?
Which is still so amazing. Just let's not overlook. It's so easy to just start accepting this as it's just how it works. It's incredible technology. It blows me away.
Totally.
Just to be starstruck, just for a minute.
Yeah. And third, it can use tools. So when I say tools, a simple example of a tool might be to go out and make an internet search, right? So you go, hey, agent, I want you to go out and do a search for me on topic X, right? Which kind of Perplexity is sort of doing that. But so that tool might be something that is almost like an integration with, say, an outside data source, or it could be something completely custom that you built. But just think you see these situations where you go to some of these services and you go, you try to do math and large language models weren't built from that. There's actually calculators, right? So go use a calculator, right? Some things you should just program, software is not going away, right? So take these three ideas, right? Built around autonomy. If you've got pure software on one extreme and a human worker on the others, these AI agents are moving closer to being like a human worker. I'm not saying they're taking over the world. I'm not saying that, but just as a mental model, they're able to work more and more on their own. Mm-hmm. So think about what this means for the software industry. The whole industry has been built around licenses to humans. You buy your Office 365 or your Google Docs, and it's here's your license for a human to use that. So if you're running a call center and you start replacing the call center software with actually virtual agents, there's no licensing per seat on that, right?
Should there be? Could there be?
Well, how does it even make sense?
Yeah.
You're saying, I want to have this many agents, I've got this problem. So what you're seeing in the buzzword is not software as a service as software.
Yeah.
Right? You're saying okay, I want to take these specific tasks and I want to automate them. So this is super, super exciting for me and us, because when Nicole and I started AltaML, we were we want to start industry specific. We want to do that. And for the last 5 or 6 years, been well, you're kind of in the unsexy part of AI. So don't get me wrong, AI is sexy, but we're the horrible part of the system because we're not building these big, large language models. We're we could never, these things always break. They always hallucinate, right? They don't work in production, right?
Right, and that technically is a black box from where you're looking or where most of us are looking.
Now these AI agents allow us to use that power and actually apply them for real business problems. So this changes everything.
Okay.
So we are now in a new era for AI. Think of it as like we had this whole academic thing. Then you had like in the industry, all these proof of concepts, and all these corporates were doing exactly what you said, trying to just kind of fool around, right? Mm-hmm. And then over the last couple of years, we've seen like the Chat GPT like moment where it goes like, oh shit, look at what this can do, right? Like, and we've all had that moment where you're like, I can't believe it did that. But there's not that many organizations that are saving significant amounts of money or changing their business outside of big tech, by using this technology, right? So this next wave is all about AI agents, and it's all about taking this and actually applying it and actually getting meaningful results within organizations.
And at that level, it's not, as again, I'm looking at your services list, and that makes, if it's a manufacturing client or a financial services client, the output will be different, but the accessibility to it feels like the playing field is leveled out. We can all get access to the power grid.
well, yeah. And so what our organization is going to look like in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months is a network, an ecosystem, an army of AI agents. So imagine if I could come and have let's take a new Alberta, I'm not going to mention their name, but it's a home builder. It's a decent sized home builder, but not a massive organization. Like beforehand, we could only go to the biggest enterprises, and we would go in, and like you say, and then eventually after you lose your executive support, then some CTO blames you and fires you and kind of takes it in. So I've had those conversations. I'm kind of a handshake guy. I want to talk to another founder and be like, hey, here's what I can invest in. Here's what we can invest in, and let's get some shit done. Right. Well, to a large extent, the mid-market, we couldn't go because you needed so much data and we needed a big enough problem. Now, so we talked to this one situation. It's in construction home building, right? We're saying, do you know how this could actually change our estimating function? And, without getting the details, we looked at it and it was like we would not have been able to have that same conversation 6 or 9 months ago, right? Construction companies on safety-related use cases and how to augment site supervisors. Like we can't get site supervisors in certain regions, right? How do we do that, right? Like there are the number of use cases that have been opened up now think of any single time that you could have like a business processes, like BPO, like business process outsourcing. Any situation where there's a lot of paper and a repeatable process will be able to be significantly automated. So every task for every white collar worker in every industry now can be taken on.
Good thing you weren't going to talk about people losing their jobs.
Well, and so let's come back to the job thing.
I felt the fear come up of the audience just right there when you made that comment. So before we get into that, because that's a little bit of a rabbit hole into itself. We'll use that home builder as an example. It's a space that we work in as well. So I got a good head wrapped around it. Do they now own that agent? Do you build that agent for them? I'm being very practical to really help people understand it.
Yeah. So we're investing. So I want to build a base level agent, right? Okay. And so we're going to build a platform of these agents and a bunch of the tech that makes this all work, right? So you don't care whether you're using this large language model or that one. We're going to use a bunch of open source ones so that the unit economics work, right?
Well, and they're back to biases. That having access to multiple also can eliminate challenges too, right?
Right, 100%.
It's like having one person on your board or 6. You're going to get more perspectives.
And we should talk about DeepSeek and the US versus China.
We'll get into that for sure. But I think having access to a variety of perspectives is also valuable for the output, period.
It's going to be 80-20. We're going to bring in a base level agent. So if we've solved, say, estimation 5, 10, 20 times, right? Say listen, we understand your estimation process probably has these characteristics of it, but your workflows, your specific data, that's all yours, right? You don't want to give up your competitive advantage. So we can bring a bunch of IP and we can bring the software platform.
But the 80-20 of that makes sense because right? The 80 is going to be consistent. The 20 is what we do uniquely over here.
Exactly, right? And so this is where it gets really exciting is everyone hates buying software because they hate paying per unit cost, right?
Yep.
And they also hate having their team change their entire workflow. Now, we actually have these agents that work directly into the workflow that we can customize to the processes and the data of that client, right? And we want to position AltaML as being the biggest player in the space to build out these agents to be able to, because you could do it on your own if you wanted to build up the dev shop and do this and put in the millions of dollars worth of investment, right? And so it's a totally new type of software platform. It's not like you're going to come to some SaaS app and it's going to solve everything because it's got to be embedded in the processes in the organization.
So it's base software where you're getting scalability of, we've already figured this out.
Exactly.
But you're getting that custom piece that allows you to differentiate and make it your way without, hey, you know what? Adobe, Microsoft, when I call them, they don't want to customize their features to what my team might want to do. We bend to their will. What I'm hearing you say is, no, there's going to be a balance of that, which is personalization. And I really love how it allows the value prop of the way that company customizes, or that 20-year leader who really is the subject matter expert. You can put that special sauce in. If that's what I'm hearing you say.
100%, right? And we're perfectly set up for this because we've got the team that can go in and co-develop or build custom software. We've also got the ability to invest dollars ourselves in this, right? So
this becomes also a huge joint venture opportunity for you, or partnership, or whatever words you use in that case.
Yeah, like we're building a different type of are we an investment firm or are we a software company, right? I don't know. Like
I'm sure that debate. I'm sure you have that debate often. Yeah, totally.
Well, and as I'm
picturing your board meetings of like, what are we anyways? Like debating back and forth.
Well, yeah, and at the end of the day, we're both, right? We're both these things that come together, right? And so I want to build software that like I would want to buy myself, right? I don't want to just sell something and lock someone in on a contract. And I mean, you're seeing this now with Doge and how many software licenses, like, even some of the names you mentioned, like massive contracts for people that had never logged into the software, right?
Yeah.
And the dirty secret in the software industry is like, there's all this bloat, there's all this there. Like people have been selling software by taking out executives for steak dinners and golf trips, right? And like, it's not actually making a difference. If you actually want to make a difference in the healthcare system, if you actually want to make a difference in climate change, right? You need to, like, the software needs to work, right?
You
like
need to actually make a difference,
right?
Totally.
Right. So there needs to be results, right? So that type of a system being able to actually the scalability of SaaS with the customization of bespoke software, that's the value prop that I think we can bring.
With the flexibility and learning and adaptability, that is agentic AI.
Exactly. That's only because of what we've seen in the last 3 to 6 months. I think we're going to look back and have DeepSeek, the Chinese model. It came out 6 or 8 weeks ago now. Like that will be the turning point for this agentic future, because everyone's talking about the cost, and there's a bunch there that's misreported. It didn't just cost $6 million. The China-US thing is real, so there is some substance there. But this was really the point where we're saying, like, wait a minute, like, intelligence is now a commodity. We're seeing this. We're seeing an open source model that is as good on many metrics as the best closed models. And so this is changing the conversations with capital providers. They're saying, oh, maybe there won't be just one model to rule them all. Maybe there'll be more. And so this is opening up the thesis to the application layer, which we've been sitting in going like, hey, we're over here, right? So it is the best thing that could have happened, right? And now it's enabling a new generation of business owners and founders and executives to be like, okay, what can I do, right? Like, I'm beyond just using calendar scheduling. Okay, can I actually make a difference in my business?
Interesting. Well, since you brought up DeepSeek, we got to get into the biases and who is behind it and who owns what and what information it's been loaded into. Because again, there's an interesting book I read not long ago. It's called Stealth War, how the China took over while the U.S. slept. It was a bit of written by a brigadier general from the U.S. Air Force. And it was quite like, whoa, like, again, I appreciate how far it was leaning in one direction, telling its story, but it was thought provoking of just remember who's behind it and what's their motivation, and does that actually align with you? Well, just leave it at that. If someone wants to check out the book, it's quite an entertaining read. But when I thought DeepSeek, I was like, ooh, right away, it gave me this sense of like, who's behind that? Who's collecting my data? What biases am I getting? But that's also true across all the platforms to a certain extent, right? Are there biases built into this that I'm now bolting into my organizational function and my organizational culture and way of doing things?
So I don't know, do we need trigger warning here?
I know, that was a lot.
Like when you get into, so
do we need a safety word card? We didn't prearrange that.
Right. So Tiananmen Square happened. It's a fact in history. But if you go to some models built in China, like, you can't find any information on that.
Yeah.
And, go up and look at this on Twitter. You can see a side-by-side from many of the big US ones in terms of asking about Taiwan. Saying like, hey, Taiwan is recognized by the United Nations. It's the boom, 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 boom. Mm-hmm. Like, there's these facts, right? And one say like, China is a province. So clearly there's a Chinese perspective and there's a Western perspective, right? And so to say that there aren't biases in models, I think is just factually incorrect.
Right.
I think we need to get to a point where we can actually have candid conversations about these things in this crazy politicized world where so I'll give you an example. JD Vance And I know like half the visitors or listeners just left, right? No,
We're testing our ability to have dialogue, and I appreciate that, Cory.
So listen, some of my friends absolutely love JD Vance and Trump and Elon, and some people absolutely detest it. Whatever. This is not a political conversation here, right? I'm saying so. JD Vance went to a big AI safety conference, and his speech, I would argue, is extremely articulate, more so than any politician of his level that I've ever seen. He basically come in with knowledge of AI regulation. And he talked about like number one of, I mean, there was a bit of rah US, of course, right? Which you'd expect.
But we're talking about the underpinnings. Okay.
But he got into regulation. He said, if it's big tech that's asking for regulations, is that really helping our citizens? Shouldn't we be building regulations and shouldn't we be looking at the opportunity for AI, right? And not just having it held in the hands of a few small corporations? Which to me seems reasonable, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He also talked about, eliminating bias from models, right? And specifically here, you can see like in many ways, George Orwell has predicted the future. Like we are. You could argue maybe every winner changes the history, and maybe that's always been true, but like this does it at scale in a way, right? I think we should build AI models that actually try to get to the truth. Call me crazy, right? Which again. And then he talked about the American worker and how the American worker can't be left behind in this AI change, which, our purpose is elevating human potential through applied AI. Like we believe that AI will be tools that will help augment human potential. So again, a lot of these things, I think there's like, okay, there's some good ideas there, right? But if it were written, I think, by someone else, maybe on a different side of the political spectrum,
there wasn't as polarizing,
different, right? Yeah. And so when you see the headlines, it says like, JD Vance wants to get rid of all AI regulation. I'm like, well, that's not what he said, right? And so let's have a conversation about these ideas, right? And let's leave sort of our political is at the side. And this matters for Canada in a big way because the EU has put out regulation that has essentially made many types of AI essentially illegal.
Oh, interesting.
So
I've heard some murmuring. I don't know any of the details about it.
Yeah, and you're for the purpose of this conversation, just know like there's a very heavy-handed EU regulation. There's a Chinese worldview, and then the Musk sort of like free speech aspect of it is coming more in terms of the American one, right? Mm-hmm. So that in itself is
very polarized too. There's equal on both sides, basically.
Exactly.
A slight percentage more technically based on the election on one side than the other, but very, very small margin.
Yeah.
I am curious about bias because cognitive bias, personal bias, like you could write articles about it. One thing I've always paused a little bit is like we want to hold up this technology to be unbiased. Yet I've yet to meet a single individual in my journeys that have ever been unbiased.
Right.
How, again, I'm putting a lot of pressure on you to answer this question. How do we create a system that to a certain degree is a reflection of us in one way or another, and maybe we have to break that trend, but bias is everywhere. And the worst ones are the ones you don't even realize. My blind spots are real. I'm aware of my blind spots. I'm like, well, then therefore it's not a blind spot anymore. All those concepts. It feels like a pretty big ask to create something that doesn't have biases, when yet that's something we as enlightened humans on this journey have not even come close, in my opinion, to mastering.
And there's a lot, you're totally right that AI is held to a higher standard than humans, and probably rightly so, right? Yes. So let's talk about some areas of bias that we are easy to agree with, right? You should not discriminate for a loan based on the color of someone's skin.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, of course, right? Like, someone's sexual orientation, their color of their skin, their race, their religion, like none of these things should be used for decision making. Mm-hmm. And so there's a field within AI called responsible AI that deals with privacy bias and a whole bunch of things underneath. We've got an amazing group of thought leaders internally inside AltaML, and we're looking at it going, how do we integrate this into every stage of the process? Mm-hmm. So one example that we've seen is at one point we were working on a project that had to do with, it was a public sector grant, right? And gender was stored by, male or female, right? So, and I'm not getting the whole sex versus gender thing here, right? But I'm like, listen,
yeah, but that's how
right? Like we had a team member who's like, I can't be represented in this data set because of how the data is actually stored deep down within, right? And you go, okay, and clearly there's studies like if you have the exact same resume, John gets the job, Jane doesn't, Tyrone doesn't, and Muhammad doesn't, right? And so we clearly need to eliminate that bias. That's like just open and shut. Makes sense, right? Like, let's make sure we don't exacerbate biases that already exist through these tools, right?
But when you're building your systems, you can easily, I want to be careful with the word easily, you can make a decision to then, we're not going to take this aspect of the data set into consideration for the move forward. But someone still has to do that though, right?
So let me give you the famous example. Right? Yeah. So we agree that like, and I have a daughter, right? I have a daughter and a son, right? Like, we shouldn't have every single time you go ask an AI for a picture of a scientist or of a lawyer or any type of professional, a medical doctor, it shouldn't be an old white guy every single time, right?
Yep, I agree. Like, I fully enthusiastically agree with that.
Okay, we're the founding fathers of the United States, Caucasian.
I believe that factually they were, but yet that was the history that has been represented to me. I threw my asterisk on my own statement.
There you go. Well, so in situations like this, where like there was some a big tech company had some very famous models, and well, so the founding fathers of the U.S. were men, right?
Yes, they were.
Okay, so as you asked for pictures, then it was. What was returned for the founding fathers was a diverse group of, colored and female, right? Like, and so we agree we want to have an inclusive society. And so where's the level in this, right? So again, it's easy for us with a Western worldview, like, someone from China might be saying Taiwan is a state, fuck you, it is our thing. Like, no, right? And so like, there's a different perspective. There's also, there's nation state ideology. There's also ideology within, right? And so, not getting into the whole DEI, rabbit hole, right? Here's an example where it's like, okay, well, we want to make sure our image generation is more diverse to not, exacerbate stereotypes. But then at the same time, like, and the flip side of that, I won't just use, the other options. SS soldiers in World War II were not Native American females.
They definitely were not.
They were not. That one, even if we debate like the race for it, like
100%.
And so there's pictures of it. So there's limits to this, right? And so I think we need to actually have a conversation about this, right, as we go back and forth. And so it's really easy. I think if it initially comes out, we go JD Vance, right? I'm like, okay, and it's not about his politics, not about this. It's like, if we're gonna build AI that creates a better future, we need to understand these concepts, right? And we need to actually make sure we have like our values embedded in them in the right way.
And that's already presupposing that our values are the ones worth embedding.
Well, okay.
you did say you like a good philosophical conversation.
Well, I mean, that actually is a very good point, right? And so like, now at a certain point, there might be a picking of sides between an Eastern and a Western worldview here, right? But we have differencing of values inside our own. You and I have enough shared values that we connect and we have a good conversation. But if we really got a couple glasses of wine in, we might find some things like, oh, I don't actually agree with you there. And back to your point about healthy dialogue, that's where, but who gets to program the machine? Well, and we thought this was going to be an easy thing, like define hate speech, right? Like, like there's not a flourishing democracy in human history that hasn't had property rights and free speech, right? Okay, well, how do we define free speech, right? And so this is opening up, and I think what you see, this is not an AI problem, this is societal questions, and this is a question for policymakers and that side, right?
It's just tricky. Listen,
for the most part, the boring use cases we have that are optimizing a process for an insurance company, it's not as big as the problems in terms of like an image generation.
Unless that insurance company process has some type of filter, because nobody better at assessing risk from an actuarial perspective of whether you turn 26, doesn't your insurance come down because you're technically less risky when you're 24 and single and living a wild lifestyle? Talk about an industry right? That's got, and they've got the stats actually to back that up, where they'd say, no, this isn't our bias. This is just fact. We've been collecting data from an actuarial perspective. Sorry, not to pick on just because you picked insurance.
Okay. Perfect example. And let's go down this. So, no bank or insurance company would ever intentionally, well, they shouldn't nowadays. You would hope that no one would intentionally make a decision based on someone's skin color, race, blah, 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 right? Religion, right? But what if you found that within a certain postal code or a certain zip code that actually, wait a minute, we can eliminate a whole bunch of things from this credit adjudication process by going to that zip code.
Yep.
And what if that what if that postal code was on a reserve?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
so you've almost reverse engineered bias in, right? If you're not thinking about this, if you're not taking this into account, right?
But at
So
surface
it's very
level,
nuanced,
you took it out, but you actually built it in on
right?
a broader with a different set
And
of stats. Yeah, that's
and so
interesting.
everyone says, well, don't use any personally identifiable information. Don't use any of that, right?
Yeah.
Easy, right? No. Well, like
It's not.
if you're going into the hospital and you're getting treated, like you need, if you're going in for breast cancer, whether you are a biological male or female is a relevant fact.
Yes.
Like that.
So it's
Like
so dynamic.
whether I'm going to test for like prostate cancer, I've got a bigger risk than a female of my age, right?
Yes.
Biological, like that's just a fact, right? And so we say like, well, we don't want any PII. Well, then it's not going to work in certain areas like health. So it's a more nuanced conversation here to understand these things. Like it's certainly true. If there's bias in society and we do not, and there's bias in a data set, we will exacerbate and accentuate that bias by building an AI model. We should build safeguards and protocols to make sure that we don't do that. Everyone can agree on that. As we go into some of these other use cases, let's look at the nuance and how can we actually benefit humanity? How can we actually benefit the users? And these are complex questions, right? And we haven't even got into the surveillance state and all the rest of those things and all those other things that are happening right now, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope and what I love about the long form podcast and frankly, for the first time we've seen that in Canada now with some of these long form interviews. We saw it in the U.S. election. I hope as we come up to the election, I hope we see both candidates, like both Carney and Polyev. I hope we see them, like Polyev has given some long form podcasts. I hope we see that with Carney as well, right? Like it's very powerful to be able to explore these. And if we can just check our politics at the door with some of this stuff and go, okay, like how do we actually make sure we understand these issues and understand how this technology is shaping our lives? I think it's going to make us all better. It's not easy, but in theory, like that should be what we strive for, right?
And there's a hope that there's a degree of bipartisanship playing out on these things, but it's like giving a lawyer a document, inspecting it, not to come back with red ink on it. If you give a politician a piece of information, they're going to politicize it into a position, right? Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's overly simplistic to say, I don't like Grok because of Elon Musk and that way. I just think that's a short-sighted worldview, right? I think look at...
Well, it's a bit easy. It's a bit lazy.
So Elon Musk was the initial money in OpenAI. That's been widely reported like 50 million, right? Mm-hmm. Why did he fund OpenAI initially as a nonprofit? Because he was worried about what was going on at Google. Whether rightly or wrongly, he was worried about AI safety. And so he started a nonprofit, or he was one of the co-founders, or if it wasn't, don't quote, he was early on funder, right?
Yep, I've read lots about
that 50 million,
and then
right?
why he pulled back and why he left and why it kind of diverted into a different path.
And maybe there's another piece of that, but like the fact is, on day one, he wanted open source to benefit the humanity, so that one company didn't control what might be AGI or general intelligence, right? So you kind of got to look nuance, and so when there's because especially with Doge and everything that's going on right now, there's an initial reaction and we just go, well, there's actually a history and there's a bunch of pieces here and saying like, actually, having more competition, having a number of these large language models, I think is super powerful. Having some of them that are closed, having some of them that are open source. So Llama, the Meta or the former Facebook's model is open source, right? Grok is open sourcing their older models. DeepSeek actually is open source as well. So you can actually have DeepSeek and use that on the Chinese model, and you can have that on your laptop. You can turn off the internet. It doesn't have to communicate back to the Chinese servers, right? The reason everyone knows it's true is they've open sourced it. They've shown their work. They did these brilliant math things, I'll call it, right? They had these brilliant hacks to actually make it better, right? So you can debate how much it cost, and probably cost equivalent to the US companies or whatever, but they were limited by the number of GPUs they had. And so they did these brilliant
interesting
hacks.
They had to game their own process,
right?
Yeah.
And so one thing that I will say, and we can jump into some other topic here for it, but like, AI is entering a new age, an agentic age, where what you've seen now on tools like Perplexity and ChatGPT is getting taken to industry. We need to clearly do so in a safe and responsible way, and that's a big discussion, right? But now that you've got all these LLMs, it's almost like intelligence. The cost of intelligence is plummeting and available on demand. There is never a better time to be a builder. There is never a better time to be a founder than now.
That's exciting, what you said earlier, especially the access to smaller, mid-sized organizations. The more democratization of access is exciting. Back to your point about who's getting left behind. If the model stayed at the top tier, a huge group could get left behind. But now there feels like there's a higher chance for people to kind of roll up their sleeves and get involved and actually have access.
That
excites me a lot.
There will be billion-dollar companies with less than 10 employees.
Oh, I love that. When's the first billion-dollar company with one person or 10 people?
And you're seeing all it. I can post the link afterwards. There's this awesome guy.
Please. I'm happy to share it.
Henry, and he put up this kind of I forget the exact name, but basically like the whole venture capital model might be turned on its head for some of these use cases, because traditionally you need to go in and just get as much capital as possible, and you won through higher investments, right? Well, now you're seeing all these companies that are built that are getting to $1 million in ARR, so annual recurring revenue, like in months, right? And you're seeing companies that are built to 5 to 10 million in ARR with little to no VC money, or even completely bootstrapped. Like this wasn't possible.
That changes the power dynamic really aggressively, doesn't it?
Right. So all of a sudden, I'm hoping that we can make the pitch and say, like, listen, there's one path. I mean, there's a good VC path, and there's lots of great VCs, and I want to be friends with my VC friends.
Yep.
But there's some use cases where we say, like, listen, could AltaML be your one-time investor? We want maybe a little bit more of a chunk early on, but like let us invest more, and let's never raise capital ever again. Like, we don't have to be purists for like some seed, Series A, Series B, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's going to be hundreds of opportunities like that.
That's exciting, because then the accessibility, the impact on society, the elevation of different individuals to different levels, like that feels more democratic than the lineup for and like, let's be honest, what model isn't getting disrupted, right? Whether it's VC, whether it's marketing, whether it's pick something, it's being disrupted, and we can get on with it or dig in our heels.
And it is, I would say, democratized is the right word. One of the most famous VCs, the guy who founded Netscape, his name is Mark Andreessen.
A16,
yeah.
They carry some weight.
If you want to dig into the regulatory side, like see his interviews that he's they're all public on YouTube, right? Where he was talking about the former administration and how they really wanted all the power residing with a couple big AI companies, right? And they didn't want A16Z to be investing in AI startups.
Interesting.
That's scary,
I haven't run into
right?
any of that.
Could we build in Calgary? Could we build a frontier model company? No, I don't think we've got for a variety of reasons. Can we build hundreds of companies that are using agentic workflows and building up the industries where we have expertise, especially energy and ag, right? But what gets me most excited is health. I think that there will be an absolute renaissance in the type of companies that can be founded, right? And it's opened up the number of use cases exponentially.
That's exciting. And you think about the opportunity, though, to exponentially deliver more value to your end customer because of your use of these technologies. Back to just the fundamentals. If you can deliver value to your customer, you get a customer for life, and you get more access, and you get business. What I'm really hearing is doing a little bit more with less, but also doing better with less. To oversimplify the words a bit, maybe.
But we've built all these processes built around. So one amazing founder locally, I don't want to get in trouble with him because he's like kind of half stealth, half not, right? Like,
okay, well, that's your call.
He's not stealth. It's called Brilliant Harvest. It's not, I mean, you should see on Twitter, but like a lot. So Remy Schmeltz, brilliant entrepreneurs, had a number of previous exits, big exits, and he's using agentic workflows, using AI agents to optimize the sales and service for ag equipment. Mm-hmm. So, every time you drive by one of those, like, John Deere equipment dealers, right? Well, like, there's massive amounts of CapEx with these tools, right? And, in the past, when you had a problem during harvest, what do you have to do? You pick up your call.
Yeah, you call the guy with the truck, and he comes out with all his gear, and he tries to service your machine.
But there's a unique edge on data because it's very specific in terms of that, right? In terms of, and so the service side as well as we think that you're going to see agents that actually can better understand the sales process as well, right? Brilliant idea. We just made a seed investment in a company called Prevoir. Courtney's awesome founder locally in Calgary on optimizing actually the purchase for fashion, which I'm I know absolutely nothing. I am not the subject matter expertise in this one. As you can see from my fucking t-shirt. But like, as it turns out, a lot like of the buyers in the industry are almost just have been turned into like Excel jockeys, right? And so you're having to just get like, you're getting all this data that's coming in. How do you understand what trends are happening, what you should buy? And so you've got thousands, tens of thousands of SKUs for mid-market fashion brands, right? You know, we're building agentic solutions around that, right? And so there's agents that are then looking at the agent's work for build a plan, rate this plan, get the human feedback, right? These problems that again couldn't have been taken on a year ago, right?
Just with the amount of data that we have access to, how do you process it, and how do you process it in a valuable way that then allows you to automate aspects of your business? Because we've been collecting this data, right? But the challenge still is, what do I do with it, and how do I create valuable meaning from it? And as individuals, we don't have the scope and scale, but as building automation into that model, and still, does it still require, like thinking about the job thing that we only touched on very, very briefly, the job thing, way to trivialize it. Where does that individual have to be? Because, you know, I've run into a lot of industries where they're like, hey, we're concerned because the senior people are using all the tools, and now they're not mentoring. They're not teaching that younger generation. The younger generation goes to the tool.
So the lawyers bring this up all the time, right?
Okay, yeah.
So
I've heard it in like, HR, accounting, service-based.
When I grew up, I had to I had to stay up till 2 a.m. in the morning.
I paid my dues. The hazing, right?
It's the same with CFAs. It's the same with CFAs, right?
Yep.
Like, moving data from one column to another is not freaking training, right? And so if we lived in a world before computers, would we say, the way you should do legal research is you should go back to our library back there and pound the books, because in 1973, when I came out, I went up and I became best friends with the librarian, and I went back there and I learned how to do legal research, right? How are you going to learn if you don't learn the way I did? Like, how insane does that sound? But we're making that exact same argument every day with every profession. Accounting, legal, engineering, everywhere. We have an army of brilliant 20-somethings that are doing shitty fucking work. Like, why don't we look at this?
Because that's the way we've always done it. Yeah.
Why don't we look at it and go like, hey, if we can eliminate 20 or 30% of the grunt work in your day for a financial analyst, hey, I would love you to talk more to additional founders and see what opportunities they're seeing in the space. I would love you to talk to our investors and see what's out there. I would love you to actually go out in real life and maybe actually meet some people and actually have conversations. Like, I mean, if I can get rid of the bottom stuff that my analysts hate and allow them to actually get out of Excel and go talk to someone, I think I'm going to be able to attract better analysts because their life isn't going to suck. So
we're slow to give up what was the traditional hazings of many of those professions. Yeah,
there's a techno-optimist movement, right? And if you want to be Malthusiast and like just that everything's going down, and there's a brilliant a guy named Joe Lonsdale, an American optimist, that has a brilliant podcast on that. Kind of goes through like the 4 detractors in AI, and I can post the link. Like,
please do, yeah, please.
It's like, he also argues that actually the best founders should be philosophers, which maybe that's a conversation for you and I over a beer, Tyler, someday. But
I'm sensing there's some space there for us.
Like, can't we think of new ways of building things, and can't we think about how this actually enables it, right? Can't we think about like how many dumb things we're doing in society, right? And get rid of that. And so Mark Andreessen, again, I'll come back to him since I'm not an authority, he is, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, anytime you've ever lowered the cost of a good throughout economic history, you've increased the demand for that good or service, right? So why do we think this time is different? And like, will there be certain industries that are dramatically affected? Yes, 100%. And you go back, do 98% of people, or 97 or whatever, before the agricultural revolution were farmers? Do we want to go back to that world, right? There was a huge percentage of people that were on the typewriters or
typewriter.
Typewriter. I took typing classes in school, right?
I took one as well.
First was a typewriter, then was a computer, right? Switchboard operators. Like, do we like, frick? We don't even need phone companies anymore. We got the internet, right?
Is it the speed in which it's happening that's making it a little bit more scary for people?
So I question that this time is different.
Okay. We certainly like to say that it is.
Well, like, imagine a world like our grandpa's grandpa never had flight. Like, how crazy it was when you can actually get on a flight with and go across the continent in this like aluminum tube. Like, that's actually like a really big change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how crazy is it when 10% of kids died of measles or whatever I'm not sure the number's wrong.
I know. Yeah.
I go back. If you look at history, are the changes we're experiencing now, and we always want to say that we're better in this and that in this generation and complain about the last one, but like,
yeah, take that out.
I wonder, but it's a good question. I don't know. Maybe there's some areas that it is moving too fast, and maybe, like I'm a capitalist. I believe in free markets. I do believe I've got some libertarian-ish, but I don't believe like we should like take away
and a little dash of populism and a little dash of libertarianism.
Like can't we just look at ideas and what we like? Like, do I think like we shouldn't have roads? Like, no, that's dumb. Like, it's not Milton Friedman. Like, the government should build roads, right? Mm-hmm. They should outsource it. They do a bad job of it, but when you think of there should be some situations where we're going to put in the right programs to like actually support change for certain professions to make sure that we don't go too fast, right? Like, so what happens when autonomous driving is working and everyone who was an Uber driver can't make that extra money? Well, I guess you could argue, well, they didn't actually have that job as an Uber driver. That tech actually created new opportunity, new jobs.
Now we're talking about the taxi industry versus the Uber, and it seems to have leveled out. I'm assuming that there's been some, anyways, yeah, we're going down some weird rabbit holes that require more data for us to really beat this up. But and also you look at healthcare, you look at energy sector where things can go wrong, people can die, things can blow up. There is a need for regulation, and like, how do you balance it all out? And humans are notoriously not awesome at change. And that's a broad statement because not everyone is, not everyone isn't. But I think statistically, change management often gets overlooked from a societal level, let alone at a company level.
Yeah. Right? So the question I totally agree. So the question I think we should be posing is, how do we balance the opportunity with AI and how much benefit this can bring with some of these downside risks? Mm-hmm. And again, you can say put your head in the sand and just not use this, right? And I think there's issues from a national defense perspective if that's the case, right? And I think
I don't think that's the right approach. I don't think we think that's the right approach.
Well, and I'll say, okay, if we're not going to use this new technology, how do we solve Canadian productivity? Which for the last decade, I mean, this is just a fact, is in the toilet, right? Like, we are in Alberta, we are the best performing province in our great nation. And we would be amongst the worst performers in the U.S., right? We'd be bottled, but by most metrics, we bottom 10 or 20% for economic performance in the U.S. So, like, how are our kids going to have the right standard of living if we're not building stuff? How are our kids going to have the right standard of living if we don't have that productivity? So, if not AI, in that
concept, it's a non-negotiable. But back to your point, if it's a non-negotiable, then how to do it the most effectively to balance out the upside and the potential downside? Because you can't blanket. Yeah. It's too indulgent to just a blanketed answer. It's not that simple. Mm-hmm. But not doing it is a non-negotiable. I would say. I will boldly say. I'll go on the record.
And the biggest opportunity here is health, right? Mm. So there's a bunch of policy and privacy issues that are there. Like, so if you go to the average Albertan, you say, like, do you want a de-identified portion of your data to be used to make better support tools so that a clinician can make a better decision?
Feels like an easy yes for most of us. Specifically to your point about it was cleansed of your personal data.
If you did that, and like,
if that's your fear, we've been taught the last couple of years to be more fearful for that. Yeah,
right. But like, so at what point are we going to expect our doctors to be using these tools to help support their decisions?
We're pretty damn close, I would say.
And so I would say there are great people within the system trying to solve this and trying to actually use data in the right way. Like, it gets to kind of almost like the organ donor side. Remember, like you have to sign this, and if you don't sign it, it's not right. And so if you make it opt out instead of opt in.
Yeah, I love that. I love that little. Yeah, I love that.
Just that one little thing. If you want to opt out and you don't want to, but like, if we did that one thing, we could create a data superpower in this province. Like we've already got a huge edge on data in that space, right? So it's like, let's make sure we've got the right way where researchers, startups, and, multinationals can ethically and responsibility come and build here, right? There's a real opportunity around that. We want to have a life science industry built in Alberta, right? It's swallowing the economy, right? So if you look at the biggest issues, it's healthcare and housing, right? Yeah. Well, housing, I can give you 20 use cases around optimizing housing permits and building permits that can use technology, right? Like, I don't know that there's any good reason, like the person that's holding up that process and delaying a building permit, right, and making that difficult and especially in Vancouver or Toronto, right? Like, if we don't watch out, Calgary will be Vancouver and Toronto, and then no one will move
because
here.
because it's flowing out of those bottlenecked regions to here, yeah, for sure.
Right. So do we like some estimates are that Vancouver's 50% of the house price of a house is paperwork. I think the number's low.
I've heard some numbers. That's just 50-50. Just blows your mind. Yeah.
The number's lower in Alberta. I don't have the exact stat. It'd be interesting to get the right one. But like, we know it's not zero, right? Like, how many people are having problem getting the down payment on their mortgage, right? Like, I'm looking at all the 20, like, I got my house. I'm good, right? My kids aren't. Everybody that I'm hiring here who's working as a machine learning engineer, I want them to stay. I want them to stay in Alberta. I want them to stay in Canada. I want them to buy a house, right? But at this point, and so that's not going to be solved with technology alone. But if we have technology combined with policy, I think that helps. And then you can take that and we could get into so many things in the healthcare system, right?
Do you see a lot of protectionism, like the power of an institution protecting itself for the sake of itself? And I think healthcare, I think education, I think provincial municipal politics, these organizations, I've been in this job for 20 years. I feel threatened. The way we do things, like they feel like they entrench and put walls up just to protect if we want to get into different forms of philosophical debate, these institutions definitely protect themselves for the sake of it, not necessarily the sake of who they serve.
So
since we're going to be philosophical here, Cory.
In Silicon, I'll take this. Yes. In Silicon Valley, you are a software engineer. In the rest of the world, you are a software engineer. In Alberta, up to the last year or so here, because we had a massive fight around this, the regulator,
I know you
have to be a software developer, right?
Yeah.
Well, if I'm posting a job that's public and people look in those keywords, right, it doesn't match up with the rest of the world. The argument that, and like, I can be an accountant, right? And you go, Tyler, you go, Cory, how good an accountant are you? I'm like, I can open up QuickBooks, right? You're like, did you go to school? It's like, well, no, I'm not a CPA. Oh, you don't have a professional designation. Okay, cool. But I can still call myself an accountant, right? So engineering, no one is saying you can't, you can say PEng, like that's a designation that should be protected. Yep. That's an indication of quality, just like CPA, just like CFA. I can be an analyst. You can be like, you're the worst analyst in the world. I'm like, but I can call myself an analyst.
You can call yourself an analyst, yeah.
Right? Every single profession in the world. So when you talk about digging in, the amount of time we wasted on this one here, fighting that, and you know what it's about? It's about money.
Yeah.
And the argument's like, oh, this is about public safety. Bullshit. It's not about public safety.
Where did that net out? I haven't heard this brought up for a while.
Well, we have great leadership within tech innovation and the government of Alberta to try to find a balance between, you still can't be an ML engineer, but you can be a software engineer, and it's still fighting in that. But so okay. I would applaud the government of Alberta to try to find a pragmatic viewpoint in this one. This is one, but like, these are battles we don't need to be fighting, right? These are battles we don't need to be fighting. Back to being
it's the desire to protect itself, not to look at the bigger picture.
I'm a member of the Business Council of Alberta. I have a huge respect for Adam and everything with the BCA, right? I'm like, hey, Adam, I want you to fight from this. I'm like, well, no, there's other members within the BCA that don't want this because the engineering companies are fighting back, right? And I'm like, I'm doing freaking AI for them. They're hiring my ML engineers, right? Like, right? You know? And
so that's the level of bureaucracy that I'm really talking about when it's like, where are we getting in as our way, and where are we like creating protections and safety mechanisms, and where are we just entrenching? Those are very different things.
So I got to talk about the Arthur Child a little bit. Are you aware what's happening to Calgary Cancer Center, the Arthur Child?
Beyond that, it's happening. They're raising money. I've connected with the people that are doing the fundraising.
Tyler, it's done.
They finished. It's signed off, right? It's done.
It's 300 million. It's open. Yep. It's operating.
Yes.
Right. So biggest.
I was involved in the early days of the campaign and had Erica on and Wendy on from Alberta. Yeah. Anyways, yes.
Yeah.
But tell me more.
Alberta Cancer Foundation did a fabulous job there.
They did.
300 million. Second biggest cancer center in North America by square footage.
Yep.
Right. So when you think about an opportunity for innovation, like just the research component of it is like, I think it's something like bigger than it was at the Tom Baker beforehand. Right. Like, I mean, everyone should know locally what we have and figure out how to get behind it, because we've got the best researchers are clinicians and the best clinicians are researchers, right? So you want your oncologist to be doing work on it, to be on the bleeding edge. And so if we can bring more clinical trials to Alberta, right? And if we can have more of them come in, what it does is it creates, and I want to tie this together with the idea around the kind of like how blocked off we are from a professional point of view, right? Right now, Alberta could take as many oncologists as graduate an entire year in the entire country. I might not be 100% correct on that fact, but I'm directionally correct.
Okay.
We could take the entire graduating class for Alberta for oncologists. Now, we restrict input, and, listen, I'm sure there'll be somebody from the Canadian Medical Association, whatever, give you all the reasons why we can't have more kids getting into med school, right? And all these reasons why we can't have more, like, we absolutely need to have, like, and the oncologists, they're amazing people. They are so burnt out. Wait times are an issue everywhere. We need to be able to have different classes of profession do different work, right? And maybe there's some things that can be done by a nurse, maybe an RN. There could be other things done by other, in the US, they have something called a physician's assistant that's kind of in between. So there's different job titles that can be created. There's more people that could be let into universities. But even if we fix that problem and we allowed more people to be taken to become oncologists, that problem's not going to be fixed for many years, right?
Yeah. You're way down early in the journey. But again, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, if not then, how about today?
So we need to do that, right? But like, what's the solution if it's not technology? What's the solution other than using technology? And I'm saying, like, we will have unlimited demand, unfortunately, for oncologists. Like, there's not, it's not going to be a situation where it's here. So we talk about and so I want to try to bring together your comment around jobs going away and this whatever, right? And then the political side. It's a people problem that we don't actually have more professionals.
So our only option is.
And the only option is that. And even once we do that, right? So some profs went out years ago and said, hey, there's going to be no radiologists by 2025. I feel like those radiologists, we actually have a massive shortage of them, right? We're building tools to help augment human potential. That's what AI is. And so if you have a techno-optimist perspective, if you look at this from a glass half full, do we go like, yeah, we need to deal with these issues, but like, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. If we can actually do this and do this in a safe and ethical way, we can build it here in Alberta, right? And we can change the world, right? But it starts with mindset.
It does. Techno-optimist movement. That is my takeaway for the day.
Small tech. It's about small tech. It's about techno-optimist, right? Big. Like every organization gets more. The bigger it gets, the more evil it gets. Doesn't matter whether it's in government or private sector, whatever, right? The value. I trust an entrepreneur. I trust her. I trust a founder who's building something that she's going to do it more ethically than I would any of the hyperscalers or any nation states, right? So like, let's build that here, right? Let's as we get together and people are aware of the opportunity and founders will see this space, right? Like that's right.
I love that was an excellent, like we went all over the place and you rounded it back with a nice bow with some high degree of optimism right at the end, because we could launch into we didn't get into data centers. We didn't get into access to power. Okay. There's a part 2. I mean, there's a 4, there is a 5 timers club. You're a couple away. I think we could squeeze in a couple episodes the next week or so, get you your green jacket and all the things that go, all the perks that go with that.
If anybody wants to talk data centers,
my goodness. Cory, love having you on. I don't remember us being quite as philosophical as we were today, or certainly as you are. But as you get deeper into anything, it becomes more complicated, but yet more philosophical, I find oftentimes as well. So I'm sensing that with you, my friend.
If you're building companies, shouldn't you know philosophy, right?
I would agree with you on that one.
If you're building the organizations that change the world, should we not lean on what actually created the world today?
I completely agree with you. And if we talk about what technology is really good at from a agentic perspective, and we talk about what humans are still have the opportunity to be really good at, I think it pitches the case even harder, especially in the short term.
Totally. Listen, thanks for having me on. We'll see you everyone got to this point.
Send me a couple of those links if you have a minute. I want to dig in a little bit, but lots of great references today. Check you guys out. What's your website here? AltaML.com. Super easy.
Yeah, and the easiest thing, just ping me on LinkedIn. I respond to almost everything that's not like a fake kind of bot. If you're and I'll just say this to other founders out there, we're always looking to talk to other founders. I'd love to set you up to my team. If we're not a fit, we'd love to try to connect you with somebody else in the ecosystem, whether it's here or Waterloo or in the US. We always do our best to try to do that. So just ping me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to kind of be the traffic cop. And anyway, Tyler, it's been a pleasure. Looking forward to the next time, man.
Amazing. Thanks, brother. Cheers.